let's now get some analysis on what's happened yesterday and today, but also on the upcoming 2024 national elections, because political parties have been on a charm offensive to woo voters ahead of the polls. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa was in Soweto yesterday. He said the party is headed for a good election despite challenges facing the governing party. Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast and Dr. Levy Ndou join us now for some analysis on this. Thank you, gentlemen, for making time for us this afternoon. Dr. Ndou, let me start with you. I think we are now sitting at about 326,000 people that have registered to vote by yesterday. Hopefully, more and more people today are going to come through. When you look at the numbers in previous first voter registration weekends, is this something positive?
Good afternoon, Clement. Good afternoon, Professor Breakfast and the viewers at home. This is something that you cannot just play down, in the sense that the IEC has a responsibility to ensure that citizens have to go out and register. And each time there's a drive similar to this one, you will get numbers actually going up. At the same time, it's not quite easy to make a clear determination whether it's a positive or a negative sign, because there's still another session for registration to take place. At the same time, you have got an unconfirmed number of South African citizens. So the target of the IEC versus the population is something that cannot be confirmed as negative or positive. But I think it's a positive sign that there are voting stations where people went and registered. I took an initiative yesterday to go out and check on a number of voting stations. And I can confirm to you that there are voting stations that I visited that did not even have a single person going in to register. Maybe the population in that area has registered, or they are actually waiting for today to do so. But the IEC, in my view, has a responsibility to encourage people to participate in registration and ultimately vote. And they are being assisted very positively by many political parties who have actually gone all out to assist citizens to go out and register.
And Professor Breakfast, obviously the IEC needs to increase the number of registered eligible voters. It's been on the upward trajectory over the years, but marginally low. I think in 2014 there were just over 25 million people registered to vote. The number grew to just over 26 million in 2019. So we need to increase this margin substantially. Do you get a sense that that will be the case, given the sentiment on the ground?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. Suffice to say, my view is that there's a symbiotic relationship between voter turnout or registration and the slow pace of service delivery. I mean, the IEC can engage in road shows, raise awareness, so long as you don't address the elephant in the room, which is a slow pace of service delivery. You are going to have a challenge. So the message that was pitched across the political spectrum was targeting the audience of young people. I think that's where the problem lies. The lack of a responsiveness of the youth to register, because I think, Frans Fanon says each and every generation has its own agenda. So if you look at the, historical development of youth participation, we have had epochs where young people were active politically in the 40s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and in the 80s, arguably in the early 90s. But of late, we have seen young people opting out of politics on a large scale. Why? Because I think the environment then was demanding for them to be engaged in politics. But now young people are grappling in the main with, economic development as opposed to demanding political rights. So I think they are grappling with the question as to why should they be involved in politics if they don't stand a chance of benefiting from the fruits of a democracy. I'm not saying that that line of thinking is right. I'm just teasing out, the complexities which are at play. So my argument is that I think politicians also have a responsibility to render services, to honor the commitments that they make to the voters. Because sometimes I get the sense that an impression is created that when people don't go to register, the problem is the IEC. The problem is not the IEC. It's the leaders that we elect to be in power.
Dr. Ndou, who stands to benefit if there's lower or higher turnout? I mean, the IEC says its voters' roll statistics show that only 60% of the population has registered. So this registration weekend is so vital in closing that gap. I think they're targeting 1 million more eligible voters. What will the increase in the number of eligible voters who get registered mean for various parties? So is it the ANC that benefits if the turnout remains marginally low? Or is it the smaller parties that are going to benefit if there are more and more South Africans registering to vote? How do you read it?
No, there's a perception created that when you see political parties next to the registration centers, citizens are actually registering to vote for these parties. I would argue that political parties are playing a role in supporting the IEC to ensure that citizens go and register. But when you say a political party encouraging people to go and register, it does not necessarily mean that that person who's going to register is actually going to vote for that political party, because the political journey from now towards the elections can change at any given time. But we've had arguments in the previous elections from 2016, 2019, 2021, that there's a group of people that have decided not to go and vote, and the assumption is that they did not go to vote because they are not happy with the ruling party. And some of them have therefore decided not to vote for any other political party. And this makes the elections quite interesting, in the sense that if indeed that is correct, then the ANC must be able to go back and ensure that people who have decided not to vote for them come back and vote for them in the next elections. At the same time, opposition parties have to take advantage of those disgruntled voters who have decided to ditch the ANC, maybe to go for not to go and participate in the elections, and convince them to vote for those parties. And when fewer people do not participate in the elections, it actually benefits all the parties, because there are those who are traditional voters of all political parties, whether the registration is opened now or next week. They are traditional voters for certain political parties. Now, the other section of the voter are those who have not decided for which party to vote for, and mainly it is assumed that it's young people. So political parties in their different corners have to ensure that they develop strategies to ensure that those undecided voters have to go and vote for them. And that makes these elections quite interesting.
Yeah. Let's look at Gauteng, Professor Breakfast. For instance, I mean, it is the battleground, and it was the battleground even this weekend. Julius Malema was in Soweto, so was President Cyril Ramaphosa. The president said the ANC is confident it will win the province. Malema, on the other hand, said Soweto is the ANC base. So he says you can't want to remove the ANC without going to where it's rooted. So I imagine Gauteng is going to be hotly contested then. Are these, what we saw this weekend, signs of what we can expect in terms of political action ahead of the elections next year, especially from these big political figures?
Clement, on a lighter note, let me answer your question by a question. So the question is, and it speaks to your question, where does state power come from? In my view, it comes from two spaces in terms of time and space. It comes from the urban centers on the one hand. On the other hand, it comes from the rural section of the population. So definitely, Gauteng is going to be a geopolitical battleground. But I can argue that, I'm not a prophet of doom, but I doubt very much if the ANC is going to bounce back to the helm of power due to a number of reasons, because political behavior has changed. There are different types of voters. You get voters who are die-hard supporters, voting on the basis of party allegiance. You get other voters who vote on the basis of public policy issues, on the basis of media coverage, and you get people who are sympathizers. So I think because of the large middle class in urban centers, in Gauteng in particular, I doubt very much if people on a large scale will vote for the ruling party, unless there is a major shake-up that is done by the ANC. But in my view, it looks like the damage is done, and what is done cannot be undone. But I think, paradoxically, the ANC will improve maybe its electoral performance in the rural section of the population.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Ndou, do you get a sense that some of the parties invested a lot in the rural population, or were they mostly in the urban areas, particularly this weekend? And what does that mean for those parties? I saw John Steenhuisen was in KZN. That's his home province, but it's also quite a strategic province for the Democratic Alliance.
KZN, in my view, is quite strategic for the DA, looking at how they've actually performed in the local government elections. And what would happen with most political parties is to go out and look at the voting patterns across provinces, look at different regions, and then make an assessment whether they should actually put all their energies in those areas, or they should actually invest their energies in other areas. What appears to be the big factor, especially with the ANC, is that they've got a very good rural support, and which is a very strong point on the part of the ANC. But equally, you have got the DA and the EFF that have been able to make huge inroads, especially in the province of Gauteng and in KwaZulu-Natal. And I see a huge shift of political contestation towards KwaZulu-Natal, because you have got the DA, you have got the EFF, you also have got the IFP that has made a huge comeback in the local government elections, and they've been able to take over a number of municipalities. So KwaZulu-Natal, in my view, is going to be quite interesting. What I think we must also observe would be what other smaller parties are going to, how they are going to perform, especially in the provinces like the Free State, the Northern Cape, and the Northwest. And generally, I've not seen a huge impact with the smaller parties. And let's hope, as we have a build-up towards 2024, we're going to get a huge impact from the smaller parties. But the way it looks now, if they don't come up with something very huge, we might also always be talking about the traditional big three in these elections.
Yeah, and I suppose, Professor Breakfast, that's where the personalities come in. How big is the issue of personalities in our body politic? What impact does having a face for an election have on the party's performance? I mean, you've got Chris Pappas, for instance, in KwaZulu-Natal, that people relate with. Julius Malema, people relate with him more, you could argue, than perhaps with the party itself. So there are people that are, yes, they are voting for political parties, but personalities that lead those parties play a big role.
No, I'm for sure, because the president of any political party is the embodiment of the party, the image of the party, even though that can be dangerous, because there are political parties that revolve around certain personalities, which is dangerous, because I think, the message that is pitched by the party to a wider audience must embed itself to all the structures of the party. So yes, the issue of personality politics does influence political behavior, but the danger is when the personality of the leader is overbearing on the party.
Yeah, and Dr. Ndou, you've got some thoughts on that? Because you spoke about the smaller parties needing to do more. Do they have personalities that are strong enough to really help in the popularity of these organizations and driving the message around how intentional they are about the changes they want to make should they be elected to power?
When political parties go to their elective conferences, the leaders that they would vote for are leaders that, in the minds of the membership of the party, are those that are going to make an impact in the elections. And that creates a situation where even when we move towards the campaigning season, you are actually going to have leaders of organizations who will be the ones who will be carrying the message of political parties. And there are instances where even if you call a rally in the name of a party and certain individuals do not pitch up, the general population will not even attend such rallies. That is actually what happens in the South African politics. And indeed, that is why if there are certain individuals in certain political parties who would not be in leadership positions, the dangers will be that such parties will cease to exist. We have got political parties in South Africa that has been formed for quite some time, and what we always see are their leaders who have been in parliament since the dawn of democracy because of personalities. So the personality does play a very, very important role. But I think it is up to the general membership of the parties to say, how do we build parties and not necessarily attach that to individuals? That is a very difficult question to answer, because personalities have got a huge role to play in the body politic in this country.
Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast and Dr. Levy Ndou, thank you so much for making time for us.